welcome back to Leah's Lifestyle. It's been a little bit over a month. I took a little breaky break. Honestly, I was like, but anyways, we're just gonna kick the door down because we're a month away before a new year, and I say, let's start this motherfucker. Okay, anyways, we're gonna get back into the highly sensitive person because we're like a little over 100 pages before the end, and my friend should be coming soon, and I want to be able to give the book back and have the book finished, be able to have a little chatty chat, you know what I mean? So let's do this thing. Let me get a little sippy sip. And we'll go. I found the spot. Made sure we were all ready. It's if you want to read with me, it will be on page 127. We're all the way down at the bottom under HSPs and social responsibilities. Yee! Okay, let's do it. None of the above is meant to take more HSPs out of the battle for social justice and environmental sanity. On the contrary, we need to be out there, but in our own way. But in our way. Perhaps some of what goes wrong in the government and politics is not so much a product of the left or right, but the lack of enough HSPs making everyone pause to check the consequences. We have abdicated, leaving things to the more impulsive, aggressive sorts, who do happen to thrive on running for political office and then on running everything else. The Romans had a great general named Cincinnatus. The legend is that he had wanted to live quietly on his farm, but was persuaded twice to return to public life to save his people from military disasters. The world needs to coax more such folks into public positions, but if they don't coax us, we had better volunteer now and then. HSPs in the world of business. The business world is undoubtedly undervalued in HSPs. People who are gifted and intuitive, yet conscientious and determined not to make mistakes, ought to be treasured employees. But we are less likely to fit into the business world when the metaphors of achievement are warfare, pioneering, and expansion. Business can also be seen as a work of art, requiring an artist, a task of prophecy requiring a visionary, a social responsibilities requiring a judge, a job of growing requiring skills like these of a farmer or a parent, a challenge of educating the public requiring skills like those of a teacher, and the like. Companies do vary. Be alert to corporate culture when you take a position or have the chance to influence the corporate culture you are in. Listen to what is said, but also use your intuition. Who is admired, rewarded, and promoted? Those who foster toughness, competitiveness, and incentivity, creativity and vision, harmony and morale, service to the customer, quality control. HSPs should feel at home in varying degrees in all but the first. What was the first? Those who foster toughness, competitiveness, and sensitivity. Okay. The gifted HSP in the workplace. In my opinion, all HSPs are gifted because of their trait itself, but some are unusually so. Indeed, one reason for the idea of liberated, quote in and quote out, HSPs was the seemingly odd mixture of traits emerging from study after study of gifted adults. Impulsivity, curiosity, The strong need for independence, a high energy level, along with introversion, intuitiveness, emotional sensitivity, and nonconformity. Giftedness in the workplace, however, is tricky to handle. First, your originality can become a particular problem when you must offer your ideas in a group situation. Many organizations stress group problem solving just because it brings out the ideas in people like you, which are then tempered by others. The difficulty arises when someone proposes ideas and yours seems so obviously better to you, yet the others just do not seem to get it. When you go along with the group, you feel untrue to yourself and you are unable to commit to the group's results. When you do not, hold on. Sorry. When you do not, you feel alienated and misunderstood. A good manager or supervisor knows these dynamics and will protect a gifted employee. Otherwise, you may want to offer your giftedness elsewhere. Second, you can be intensely excited about your work and ideas. In your excitement, you may seem to others to take big risks. To you, the risks are not great because the outcome is clear. But you are not infallible, and others may take particular pleasure in your failures, even if they're rare. Furthermore, those not understanding this intensity will say you work all the time and probably resent it. You make them look bad. But for you, work is play. Not to work would be work. If this is you, you may have to keep your long hours a secret, known only to your supervisor. Or better, skip the long hours. Try treating even the most positive excitement as a state of over-arousal and strive to balance work with recreation. Your work will benefit. Another result of your intensity is that your result mind may drive you onward to other projects before you have committed the details of the last, and others may harvest what you planted. Unless you plan around this, which is not usually your style, the result will have to be accepted. A third aspect of giftedness, emotional sensitivity, can draw you into others' complicated private lives. In the workplace, especially, this is not a good idea. You want to have some professional boundaries, especially at work. I agree with that. That's a tough one. You need to spend more time with less sensitivity. Especially at work, you need to spend more time with the less sensitive, who can be great balances to you, and you to them. Develop outside of work the more intense sort of relationships that offer you the emotional depth you seek. Also, outside of work should be the relationships that offer the safe harbor from the emotional storms created by your sensitivity. Don't look for that among your colleagues, and especially not from your supervisors. You're just too much for them to handle, and they may decide that there's something wrong with you, quote unquote out. A fourth trait of the gifted intuition can seem almost magical to others. They don't see what you see, the contrast between the surface and, quote, what's really going on, quote. So, as with your unusual ideas, you must decide whether to be honest or go along with things as others see them and feel secretly a bit alienated. Finally, your giftedness may give you a certain charisma. Others may hope you will guide them rather than having to guide themselves. It is a flattering temptation, but you can only end up seeing to have stolen their freedom, which, in a sense, you would have. From your side, you may find that others seem to have little to offer in return. initial sharing may be followed by a sense of disappointment. But giving up on others leads to more alienation, whereas in fact you need others. One solution to all of this is not to insist that your gifts all be expressed at work. Express yourself through private projects and art, schemes of future or parallel self-employment, and through life itself. In other words, expand your use of your giftedness beyond producing the most noticed ideas at work. Use it to attain greater self-insight and to gain wisdom about human beings and groups and organizations. When that is your goal, sitting back and observing are okay. So is participating in it as an ordinary person sometimes, not a gifted one, and seeing how that feels. Finally, stay in good contact with many kinds of other people at work and elsewhere, accepting that no one person can relate to all of you. Indeed, accepting the loneliness that goes with giftedness may be the most freeing, empowering step of all. But also accept its opposite, that there's no need to feel isolated, for everyone is gifted in some way. And then there's the opposite truth. No one, including yourself, is special in the sense of being exempt from the universals of aging and death. Who loves that? Aging and death. Ooh, that was good. I'm gonna take a sip. Dang. I love it. Honestly, I don't know why I stopped reading this. I'm not sure what happened, why we stopped, but I really love this book. Every time I read it, I'm like, Honestly, I'm probably going to find it in the library and then, like, have it, like, listen to it on my own. So, you know, you guys should do that. Go figure that out. Page 131. Seeing that your trait is properly valued, I hope by now that you can imagine the many ways in which being an HSP can be an asset in your work, whether you are self-employed or working for another. But I found that it takes considerable work before HSPs can undo past negative ideas about their trait and truly value it. You cannot possibly convince anyone else of its value if you're not convinced yourself. So please do the following without fail. List every asset that might possibly belong to an HSP. Follow the rules of brainstorming and accept all ideas without criticism. Don't worry if non-HSPs have some of the same assets. It's enough if we have them more or also, and use every strategic logical deduction from the basic trait, thinking about your growing image of the typical HSP, considering the HSPs you know and admire, thinking about yourself, looking through this book. Your list should be long. It's very long. When HSPs do it as a group with my pushing them, so keep at it until yours is substantial. Now do two things. Write a little speech you might use during an interview and also a more formal letter, and both of them express some of your assets, embedding your trait of sensitivity among them in a way that quietly educates your employer. Here is a part of a possible script which would be a little informal for a letter. And besides my 10 years of experience with young children, I have considerable knowledge of graphic arts and practical experience with layout. In all of this, I'm aware of the unique contributions of my personality and temperament. I am one of those persons who is extremely conscientious, thorough, and concerned about doing a good job. At the same time, I think I am pretty amazing imagine I have a pretty amazing imagination. I've always been seen as a highly creative, along with earning excellent grades in school and having a high IQ. My intuition about my work has always been one of my greatest strengths, including being able to spot possible potential trouble or errors. Yet I am not one to cause a fuss. I like to keep things calm around me. Indeed, you should know I work best when I'm feeling calm, when things around me are quiet, so most people find me especially comfortable to work with, although I myself may just as happy working alone as with a few others. My independence in that regard, my ability to work well alone and on my own, has always been another one of my strengths. I like that. That was good. Real quick, before we move on, we're just going to remember page 131 to come back, so that way we can do the little test thing. But we'll do that after we finish reading. We'll get to a spot. Training. Training situations can be very over-arousing because you tend to perform worse when being observed or when over-aroused in any other way. For example, so true. Being given too much information at once, having too many people around. Oh my god, being given too much information at once. Fuck, bitch. It literally pisses me off. I'm like, you better shut the fuck up. Like, it's irrational. I'm so sorry, that caught me off guard. Okay. For example, being given too much information at once, having too many people around talking or straining to learn, imagining all the dire consequences of failing to remember something. If possible, try to train yourself. Take home the instruction manuals or stay after hours and work on your own. Or arrange to be trained one-on-one, preferably by someone who puts you at ease. Ask to be shown a step, then to be left to practice it alone. Next, allow someone else to watch you who is not a supervisor, someone who doesn't make you so nervous. Being physically comfortable on the job. Because you're more sensitive, you don't need extra discomfort or stress around you. A situation may have been deemed safe, but still be stressful for you. Likewise, others may have no problem with fluorescent lights, low levels of machine noise, or chemical odors, but you do. This is very individual matter, even among HSPs. If you do have to complain, think realistically about what you are up against. If you still want to go ahead, mention the efforts you've made on your own to solve the situation. Emphasize your productivity and accomplishments, but that you can do still better when this problem is resolved, if that's realistic. That makes sense. I like that. Page 133. Advancing in an organization. Research on, quote, shy, quote, people claim that they tend to be paid too little and to work below their competence level. It's so cute. Okay. Competence. Competence? That's how you spell competence? Competence. Yeah, it is. That's totally competence. Anyways. Research on, quote, shy, quote, people. That doesn't sound right either. Research on, quote, shy, end quote, people, quote, unquote. Research on, quote, unquote, shy people. That sounds better. Okay. Research on, quote, unquote, shy people claims that they tend to be paid too little and to work below their competence level. I suspect this is true for many HSPs, although it's sometimes our choice. But if you want to be advancing and are not, or if layoffs are being considered and you don't want to be among them, you have to pay attention to strategy. Often HSPs don't like to be play politics, quote unquote play politics, but that is in itself can make us subject to suspicion. We're so easily misperceived in all sorts of ways, especially if we spend less time with others in our workplace or do not share our thoughts with them. We can seem aloof, arrogant, odd. If we're also not pushy, we can seem uninterested or weak. Often these are utterly unwarranted projections, but you have to be watchful for these dynamics and plan to diffuse the projections. When it is appropriate, classify or casually or formally, let others know your good feelings about them and the organization. You may think your positive feelings are obvious, but they may not be if you are low-key and others are not very aware. Consider whether you also need to talk more openly about what you think you contribute, where you would like to see yourself eventually in the organization, and how long you are willing to wait to see it happen. Honestly, I wish I knew all that stuff sooner. That's things I really needed to know to be able to communicate properly in a few of my jobs. Oh, fuck. Meanwhile, be sure that you will not be taken for granted when the next promotions are handed out by writing down once a week all your latest contributions to your organization, plus an achievements elsewhere in your profession or your life. Be very detailed, at least you'll be aware of them and more likely to mention them. But if possible, show a summary of these achievements to your supervisor at your next review. If you resist doing this task or a month from now still haven't done it, think deeply about why. Does it feel like bragging? Does it feel like bragging? Then consider the possibility that you do your organization and supervisor a major disservice by not reminding them of your value. Sooner or later, you'll feel dissatisfied and want to move on, or you'll be lured away by the compensation, competition, I don't know. Competition. Or you'll be laid off while someone else competition. Being competent. Whatever. Do you wish others would notice your value without you having to remember them? This is a common desire stemming from childhood. This is seldom fulfilled in this world. I don't think I've ever had that feeling. Or are you in fact accomplishing very little? Do you care? Maybe you need to keep a record of the accomplishments that do matter to you. Trails biked, books read, conversations had with friends. If something besides work takes most of your energy, it may be what you most enjoy. Is there any way to be paid for doing that? And if a responsibility such as children or aging parents is taking up your time, feel pride in meeting that responsibility. List this as an accomplishment too. Even though it cannot be shared with most employers, actually, I feel like it can. That's like you. I don't think people understand what it means to like have to take care of like a parent while they're dying. Like, you can't just do that. Like, you have to learn how to pick somebody up where you're not hurting yourself. And about meds, like, literally people who get paid to do that are called CNAs, a certified nurse's assistant. Something less than that is like an RA, maybe a residential assistant, but you still have to learn how to help people use the shower and like put out things for them, check on them and stuff. You know, it's not as intense, right? But like still. Anyways, I feel like you should be able to write that down for employers. You know, especially if you know. The thing is, you got to make it sound good. You can't just be like, "Oh, I took care of my parents." You have to be like, "Oh, well, I took a course in this, and I did this, and I, you know, you gotta keep track of that stuff. If you do any of the things, if you do it all online, just say that. Like, I spent hours every day researching online. You know, just keep track. Be an adult. I wish I had known that, honestly, much sooner. But hey, now I can do it. So, yeah. Where were we? Employers, finally, if you are not advancing or feel, quote unquote, someone is out to get you, it's quite possible that you're just not savvy enough. There. Betty meets Machiavelli. Ooh, Machiavelli. Pinocchio. Sorry, I don't know what I'm doing. Stop it. Racist bitch. Anyways. Betty was an HSP who saw me in psychotherapy. One of the issues she often brought to me was her frustration at work. Therapists can never know for certain what's going on in situations. We only hear one side. But it sounded as if Betty was doing a fine job at work, but was never promoted. Then, at one review, she was criticized for the very sorts of behavior that seemed to us would be valued by most supervisors. Very reluctantly, Betty began to wonder if her supervisor was, quote-unquote, out to get her. The supervisor had a distressed personal life, and Betty had been warned by the last supervisor she might be, quote-unquote, stabbed her in the back. Most of the other employees got along all right with the new supervisor, but Betty's intuition told her they were going out of their way to placate their boss because they feared her. Being much older, Betty had just seen her as immature, but not a threat. But Betty was also dedicated and conscientious. She often received praise from visitors, implying that she was the most competent of those they had met in their department. She thought she had nothing to fear, but she had overlooked her supervisor's envy. But then Betty didn't like to think anything negative of anyone. Eventually, Betty took the step of asking someone in personnel to let her see her file, an appropriate move in this organization, and found that her supervisor had been putting in notes about her that were simply untrue. While positive information Betty had asked to be included was missing. Betty finally had to admit she was in a power struggle with her supervisor, but she didn't know what to do. In particular, she said over and over that she didn't want to stoop to thinking like this nemesis. Wow. Yeah. The important issue to me, because helping Betty see why she had been targeted. Indeed, she admitted it wasn't the first time in her work history. I suspected that in this case it was because, untrue as it was, she seemed aloof, superior, and therefore threatening to an insecure younger person. But underlining that was Betty's failure, even refusal to see the conflict coming. Here, in other work settings in the past, Betty made herself an easy target by preferring to be, quote-unquote, separate from the herd. Like the many HSPs who are introverted, she preferred to go to work, do her job well, and go home without adding to her stimulation by socializing. She often told me, quote-unquote, I don't enjoy gossiping like the others. One effect of this style was that it kept her too uninformed about what was going on in the information level. She needed to haul out her persona and do some chatting simply to protect herself. To know what was up to, quote unquote, have some friends at court. A second effect was that, in a sense, she was rejecting the others. Or so they felt. At any rate, they felt no urge to come to her aid, and thus the supervisors had known she would be safe to act against Betty. Another understandable mistake that Betty made, so typical of an HSP, was to be totally unaware of her supervisor's quote-unquote shadow, or less desirable aspects. In fact, Betty tended to idealize supervisors. She expected only kindness and protection from someone in charge. When she didn't receive it, in the case, she went to the person over her supervisor for help. But she thought it, quote-unquote, only right to let her supervisor know what she'd tell them what she was doing. That's insane, girl. That's fucking insane. The supervisor, of course, beat her to it, turning the higher up against Betty. Another over-idealized authority had been behaved predictably like a mortal. When I asked Betty to be more savvy, more quote-unquote political, at first she felt I was asking her to dirty herself, but I knew such purity had to be casting a long shadow, and eventually she encountered in her dreams an angry, fenced-in goat, then a tough little quote-unquote street fighter, and finally a rather sophisticated businesswoman. In getting to know these dream figures, each added something to Betty that she had in fact possessed but hadn't used, and was vehemently repressing as unacceptable. They taught her how to be at least a little suspicious of everyone, especially those as she was idealizing, including me. As she advanced in her self-reflection, much of it obviously requiring considerable courage and intelligence, Betty admitted that she had deep doubts about the motivation of everyone, but she was always trying to suppress these suspicions as one more unsavory aspect of herself. By becoming aware of them and checking them out, she found she could trust some people more, not less, and her own less conflicted intuition. Most of all, you will have a chance to meet your own inner power broker at the end of this chapter. Ooh. Regrets, inevitable and inevitable. It is hard to face all the things we're not going to get to do in this life, but that's part of being mortal. How wonderful it is if we can make even a little progress on the question life has asked us. It is even more wonderful if we find a way to be paid while doing this, and nearly a miracle if we're able to work on that in the company of others, in harmony and mutual appreciation. If these are your blessings, do appreciate them. If you have not achieved them yet, I hope you now have a sense of how you might. On the other hand, you may be having to come to terms with a vocation that was often blocked by other responsibilities or by your culture's failure to appreciate you. If you can reach a place of peace about this, then you may well be the wisest of us all. Working with what you have learned, meeting your Machiavelli, a Renaissance advisor to Italian princess, wrote with brutal frankness about how to get ahead and stay ahead. His name is associated, perhaps too much, with manipulating, lying, betraying, and all the rest of the convincing that goes on, quote-unquote, at court. I do not recommend that you become Machiavellian, but I do assert that the more his qualities repulse you, the more you need to be aware of their lurking in yourself and others. The more you claim to know nothing about such things, the more you will be troubled by secret conniving by secret conniving in yourself or others. Conniving. Troubled by secret conniving in your... I don't like that sentence. It sounds weird. The more you will be troubled by secret... I feel like there's like by a secret conniving in yourself or others. But there's no A. In short, somewhere inside you, there is a Machiavelli. Yes, he is a ruthless manipulator, but no prince, especially a kind one, would stay in power long without at least one advisor with a remorseless point of view as remorseless a point of view as that of the enemies a prince will surely have. The trick is to listen well, but keep Machiavelli in his place. Maybe you already know this part of yourself, but give that aspect flesh. Try to imagine how he or she looks, what he or she says, his or her name. It probably will not be Machiavelli. And then have a chat. Let him or her tell you all about the organization where you work. Ask who's doing what to get ahead and who's out to get you. Ask what you could do to get ahead. Let the voice speak for a while. Later, being very careful to keep your values and good character intact, think about what you learned. For example, were you told that someone is using unfair tactics and hurting you and the organization in the process? Is the inner voice being paranoid, or is it something you have known but didn't want to admit? Are there any wise moves you can make to encounter these, or at least protect yourself? I'm also going to write down that page. I'm not sure if we're moving on to the next chapter. Okay, that is the chapter 7. We made it to chapter 7. Okay. I don't know how many chapters there are, but we're on page 138. I think there's like 230 something. 235. Okay. Yeah, so we have exactly 100 pages left, which is nice. Shall we keep reading? How far is chapter 7? 30 pages. How am I feeling? Close relationships. Do we want... I feel like that's a long time. 30 minutes is a long time. We'll let it go there. We'll come back. We'll read every day until we get there. Okay? We'll get reading chapter 7 tomorrow. But don't forget to do the page 131 and 137 requests for the little righty prompts that I talked out. I'll do those and share mine tomorrow. And for those that find this on YouTube, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I post very randomly, so don't forget to hit that bell icon so you know and get notifications. Outside of that, leave a comment down below about what your 131 and 137 little scripts said. And was there anything today that really, really got you? Like today, like just randomly that little saying that got me for a little bit there. Was there something like that in there? Yeah. And until next time, I'll see you later. Bye.